Hello, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I am Brian Michael.
And I'm Angela Yeager. We have a great show for you this week with 4 Oscar nominees to talk about. And you saw a clip at the top of the show for our first movie, which is Call Me By Your Name. This is a coming-of-age story set in northern Italy in 1983. The story revolves around a young man's first love with a visiting college student. The graduate student is played by Armie Hammer, and the young man is Timothée Chalamet. This is a film by Luca Guadagnino, who is becoming a really rising director, in my opinion. This is the 3rd film of his I've seen. He really first broke out into the scene with I Am Love, starring Tilda Swinton, which was also, just like this one, a very gorgeous film with lots of scenery and very sensuous movie. Then he did Bigger Splash, which was a lesser effort, also with Tilda Swinton and Ralph Fiennes, but another one that was very focused on sexuality, sensuality, the connection between people and nature, and lots of, very romantic and sensuous scenes set in nature. And again, with this one, we have the scenery of northern Italy while love blooms. And you have a great cast, including Michael Stuhlbarg, who has been everywhere in the last year, including The Post and Shape of Water. And now in this movie plays in a great performance as the young man's father, who is a professor. And unlike the stuffy academics we usually get in films, he's not only a warm, knowledgeable man, but also a very caring father, who also knows enough to let his son kind of go and spread his wings. And so this film has been getting a lot of buzz, in part because the great director Paul Thomas Anderson said he thought it was the greatest film of 2017. I'm not sure if I'm going to go quite...
Not his own?
Not his own. Well, of other ones, I suppose. Nobody's going to name their own movie. But
he might. There's a lot of buzz coming into this film. We certainly had Scott quite a few months ago from Sundance talk about it was his favorite film from Sundance, how much he loved this film. And just to get out of the way, watch the credits. Scott just gets upset and wants everyone to watch the credits all the way through. And it is important to do. Whenever it comes to gay love stories in films, I rarely see ones that I really enjoy. Brokeback Mountain, I still had some issues with, but I really enjoyed that film. And here we have 2 this year, God's Own Country and this film that I really enjoyed. And of course, with today's in Hollywood, with all the sexual harassment and the age difference in this film is something that's kind of raised some eyebrows. Well, people have said this is set in the 80s. The age of consent was a different age. It was Italy, da-da-da-da. What I was really impressed with this is that he's, 17, the other one's 24. 24. Hollywood 24. And the relationship isn't something that's forced or pushed on us. Certainly, it takes a long time, and this movie just takes its time. And it took for a while for me to actually just kind of sit back and relax and just really enjoy this film. And that's how this filmmaker works. There's conversations before and there's conversations after that I really appreciated, because the older character that played by Armie Hammer didn't want to push things, didn't want to rush things, didn't want to do anything to hurt him. And they have conversations before and after that I really appreciated, that as grown-ups would do, and I really loved that. And Armie Hammer just, I'm forgetting the Lone Ranger. It's almost completely gone. I'm remembering Social Network, and I'm remembering
chipping away
this.
at that.
Yeah, he is so incredibly good and so confident, and he just has the speaking voice that I just absolutely love.
His deep voice.
He does. When he speaks, you could just see that as a young man, that would be somebody that you would totally have a crush on. And the young man in this movie...
Well, everyone in the village has a crush on him, women and men
everybody does.
So,
But, we're going to talk about a film a little bit later with Gary Oldman, who's odds-on favors to win the Academy Award, and I said this is one of the best performances of the year. But the young man in this movie is the male performance of the year. He should win the Oscar. It's quite a performance. You get to see him in a range of emotions. You get to see him. It's an incredible performance. And you've seen him in other films too this year. He's great.
Well, and it's funny. I just saw Hostels this week, which we're not reviewing, but he has a very small part in that. And I had no idea till he popped up on the screen. And he speaks French. In this film, I think he speaks French, Italian, and English. Not a small feat by any. Yeah. And very naturally. It doesn't seem forced. I don't know what his native language is. As far as to me, it seemed great. But his emotional ability to both convey some of the shallowness and self-centeredness of young men this age. At times he acts a little childish and a little babyish
as
at
he
times.
Should,
and,
yes.
He's 17.
Yeah.
And but at other times he has some wisdom, and I think some of that comes from the way he was raised. And his parents seem to be very intelligent, interesting people, and you can tell that he's going to become a very intelligent, interesting person. And I really appreciated that you could see that that's the way they were kind of raising him. So even though he has this self-centered kind of haughty rich kid thing a little bit going, he also is a very intelligent young man who is exploring things about himself that he that we're discovering along with him throughout the film, and I really loved that journey. And I do agree that the film, I don't think it's slow. It has a languid pace that kind of fits with if it was fast paced, it wouldn't mix the countryside where they are. It has this very feeling. They get on their bicycles, they go into town.
It feels like a book. It feels like it actually feels like a novel. I know this is based on a book, and books can have that luxury of taking the time as slowly as you want to read. And the movie just does this. It doesn't immediately
sort of unfolds very naturally.
Yeah, it doesn't automatically they see one another and it's a hookup and anything like that. It's just seen from afar and kind of after a while you're like, is this going to happen?
So
is this
Timothy Chalamet would get your vote for Best Actor over all the other. Wow, that's pretty impressive because this is his first big role for him. And he's going up against
fantastic.
Gary Oldman.
Well, I don't always go
big.
With Gary Oldman. You're like, well, there's also a career spanning. He's never been really recognized, so that's things that put into factor. But when you're just talking about the best performance of the year that's nominated, I think that's
right. And Armie Hammer, I think, was a little overlooked. He plays, and Michael Stuhlbarg as well. But Armie Hammer, it's not easy playing quote unquote the straight man, for lack of a better term. But it's the more he has the harder role in some ways, because he is the more mature character and he has to. He has to play these different layers of complication with the love relationship.
I'm really impressed.
Thoroughly
impressed.
4 stars.
3 stars for me. No, 4 stars for me.
I was like, what?
Yeah, it's easily a 4-star. Yeah.
Easily a 4-star. Yeah. Best movie of the year for you? No,
we'll
not
see.
yet. Okay.
Dun,
well,
dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So our next film, another Oscar nominee, is I, Tonya. This is a biopic about the rise and fall of Olympic figure skating champion Tonya Harding. Now, there's different, in Oregon, where we hear our art and real films, there's a lot of interest in Tonya Harding because she was from Oregon originally, and, all of her kind of rise and her fall all happened while she was still living here. So, of course, there's that local interest here. But even if you're not interested in Tonya Harding, and I have to say I didn't have a lot of interest going in her, what's interesting about this film is that there's a lot of other issues explored, particularly for me, and I know you're going to say, oh, boy, here we go, but the issue of class.
Oh, no, that expect. Sure.
Yeah, the issue of class in the figure skating world, sort of in a way, the Williams sisters have broken through in tennis, which, previously was kind of known as being this kind of very prestigious, upper class white girl sport. Figure skating was very much the same sort of way, and the way the media kind of pit Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan against each other was supposed to be this very here's this girl who's from the lower, parts of town and is not, not high class versus the high class girl, and they tried to really, play that up. And of course, this film explores those aspects, including, the fact that Nancy Kerrigan always wasn't such an angel herself. Margot Robbie's performance, I was really impressed with. We've seen her in quite a few things where she's, very stunning, and she's obviously a very beautiful woman. And I was a little worried it was going to be one of these things like, oh, okay, she's just getting nominated because she's quote unquote playing ugly. Not that Tonya Harding was ugly, but she's playing less glamorous.
Yes, correct.
But she's actually, it's not just that.
It's a comedic role nominated for Best Actress. I'm so excited. It's so nice to see comedy getting recognized.
It's comedy, yeah.
She plays 15 at one point in time. She is obviously not physically 15. I'm not stupid. But she acts 15. They have a scene with her boyfriend that she's sitting with, and they lean against a car, and she starts talking to him, and she's, very uncomfortable with her 15-year-old body, as 15-year-olds are, and it was really good. So that, wow, it's a terrible wig. And but I was really impressed, and it's a very funny film. They based it off a lot of different interviews, so you do have a couple different sides of the story. Several times the fourth wall is broken, where she turns the camera and goes, "I did not do this." Right. Or that was not true, or actually it was worse than that, or we actually did this.
Right, so it's sort of playing with our knowledge of what is true to this day, because there's still things to this day that people don't really know about the Tonya
It was the beginning of tabloid television. Right after this, then the OJ thing came in, so this is really when it kind of started right off, and it was just, up the I-5. Up the 5. And but I really enjoyed her performance. It's very smart. It does a really great job of it. I was really impressed. I kind of went in with a little bit of low expectations. My only flaw, and I don't like to just sit here and talk about nitpick. It's the thing that I didn't really like about the movie, the special effects in this film, because they got a stunt. They said, we'll get a stunt person who does the triple axel. Well, that doesn't exist. People can't do the triple axel, so they did it in post. And Margot Robbie's head is so poorly photoshopped on the stunt person's body.
Budget.
It is bad, but it is like 1996 bad. It is terrible. It takes you out of the movie. But yeah, I
agree.
really enjoyed the way, the flow, the pacing. It was a lot of fun. It's a packed house when we went and saw it. People were laughing and cheering.
Yeah, it's a very enjoyable film.
And
it is not.
I like the fact that it did give a little bit of her side of the story too. And there wasn't, because we did paint her as a villain, it did show her growing up, and she did have it rough growing up. And you do see some.
And there's a lot of talk of Allison Janney winning for Best Supporting Actress, and I have to put it on the table right now. As much as I like Allison Janney, she's
great.
A kind of a one-note performance, though, and especially compared to Laurie Metcalf and Lady Bird. If it's between those two, to me, Laurie Metcalf it's hands down should be the winner. And it's unfortunate because I feel like Janney will get it because it's a much bigger performance, much more scenery chewing happening.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so 3 stars for me on that one.
3.5. I really enjoyed it. It was so close. It was very, very close. Ooh, now we're going to move on to yet another Academy Award nominated film. This one's also for Best Picture. So let's take a look at the clip for The Darkest Hour. Okay, so that was a clip from The Darkest Hour. Ooh, this is Joe Wright, who I'm a big fan of, who directed Atonement, as well as Pride and Prejudice, and Pan. This is a big comeback film. This stars Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill as he just takes office as Prime Minister, and England's making the decision on whether they're going to fight Hitler or negotiate through Mussolini with Hitler. Oh. Needless to say, I will say my blood did boil several times during this movie because of the decisions that people were making, because it was like, you don't negotiate with Hitler, for God's sakes. This is a very well-made film and a beautiful-looking film, by the way. And it works really well. For those of you out there who are Dunkirk fans, this is a fantastic double feeture. So when you get together with your friends and do a double feature, this is the movie to watch it with, because they are dealing directly with Dunkirk.
World War II.
It is. And, the very first scene, they show Winston Churchill in a dark room. He lights a cigar, and I went, oh, Gary Oldman. And then they opened up the curtains, the lights came on, and he was gone. It was just Winston Churchill for the rest of the way. And they pull up on close-ups right up on his face. There's no sign of makeup. It looks just very natural.
Oh, yeah.
He does a great performance. It's a tour de force performance. He'll most likely win the Academy Award, which is well-deserving. So, and I enjoyed, even though I know the outcome of the movie.
Yes,
unlike
we know
Dunkirk,
we know what happens in World War II.
We weren't familiar with Dunkirk. Now we are, certainly, but we know what happens with World War II. I was really impressed. There's one little there's several rah-rah scenes, because it is politics that he had to do there. But there's one in the subway that I don't know if it was true or not. I still haven't looked that up, but I really enjoyed. I did like the look of the movie. It is a very dark-looking film.
It is.
We spent a lot of times in basements because, they're being bombed. And we spent a lot of times in bunkers.
They don't have lights in England in this period.
Not like super bright lights, no. I didn't mind that. It worked well with the cigar smoke. I really enjoyed it. After a while, I got used to it.
Gray and dark looking. Yeah. Almost too much so. Even when they're in certain rooms, I thought the film was not very good looking. I thought it was
fighting.
poor.
It was a war.
And again, with Joe Wright, with his camera work, I just feel like he gets in the way of the movie. He can't he has to be messing with the camera all the time.
What is he doing?
This director, it's been annoyed me to no end at Atonement. We're just like, just hold the camera still for just a minute. He does it a few times on this film, but I do agree with you about Oldman's performance.
There's so many conversations they have in his bedroom that just the camera sits. They can't go anywhere. They're not going under the sheets.
But he still has these flourishes. I just think he's a very mediocre director. I've yet to see anything of his that I've been super impressed with. This is easily his best film as I've seen, because I did not like Atonement or Pride and Prejudice, as you know.
Yeah.
So
that was nominated for Best Picture as well, so I wasn't the only one who liked that.
And I would say out of the 9 Best Picture nominees, Darkest Hour is my least favorite. I'm still recommending it. I'm giving it 3 stars, and that's mainly for Gary Oldman's performance. And, the historical facts, I think it is really interesting to see where England was at a certain point, that they were even thinking of negotiating with Hitler. And it's not, they're a bunch of wusses. They were in a really hard position.
Yes.
America had signed its neutrality treaty and didn't want to help it.
The conversation with America is just over the phone is,
my
gosh.
He's in trouble. Yeah. France has already capitulated. I mean, they're literally an island in terms of being isolated. Yeah. And, you're at
I really feel it, though. I really felt that because of the decisions that he was making and the things that he was doing, because we're in those small little spaces. I felt that, under fire.
But there's a few scenes, like the scene in the subway, that was just and we know that didn't really happen. And I always get sad when someone like a great actress like Kristen Scott Thomas is just reduced to like the 5-minute role of the wife.
But she's so good.
She's really good, but
she's
I would have liked to see more of her. But
yeah,
it's a fine film. It's just to me, it seemed like a very standard.
She did have the small role, but I really felt that she had his back, and I could see where he would be able to do what he does, because immediately she was like, "You need to make some friends." You know, and I love the fact that she was
Right.
able to. She was the the whisperer. She was able to to let him know, hey, that you need to be doing this. And so even though she only had few scenes, she's fantastic, and I really like what they did with that role. It could have had some more with of her, sure. Well, I would always have more of her in a movie.
Right. Yeah. So I'm giving it 3 stars.
I'm giving it 4. Yeah,
You're giving it 4?
Did.
Really?
I was so ready to go at the end of this movie. The credits hit, and I was like, "Let's go! We're fighting. Let's go sock Hitler on the jaw right now."
You were ready to go fight the
Oh
Nazis.
man, I was. There was several times where I was like, when they started cheering on the screen, I was like, "Yeah,
Wow.
I
Joe
got
Wright just
all
has
going.
the magic for
Yep.
you in a way. His directing just
I
leaves me
did.
cold. So.
We'll see if it makes my top 10, but it's
A lot of
right in
4-star
there.
movies this year.
I
So it's a tough
really
one.
enjoyed it. Yeah, no, I was surprised how much it got me. Yeah, it really hit the
Interesting.
old patriotic button. Okay, so let's check out our next film. It is a film. It's only available in streaming. So let's take a look at a clip for Mudbound. Okay, so that was a clip from Mudbound. This is a film that is got a lot of nominations as well, and it's mainly known for just being on Netflix, which is kind of strange. It's played for the theaters just for a week, just enough to be able to get Oscar contention, and now it's been nominated. It is a beautiful-looking film, and it tells a story about 2 soldiers returning from war who are dealing with PTSD before we knew what that was. And they both go into a rural farm to help their families and have to deal with the racism and adjusting back to civilian life. This is a beautifully shot film. It looks great, even though we have to see it on the small screen. I can't say it enough how much I would love to see this on the big screen. I mean, I love what Netflix is doing, but it doesn't hurt to put it on the big screen.
Well, yeah, especially something like this that's it's essentially an epic.
Yes, it
you
is.
know, it
was supposed to be a TV show, and they just decided to
You
make
can
it longer.
almost see it as a
Yeah.
mini series. It spans time, and it has these great picturesque, southern, rural, the poverty, but also the beauty of the South, which we've seen before in films. But it has these great sort of, sweeping vistas. But, I mean, even if in your big screen at home, it's not quite the same as seeing it on the big screen in the theater, and also, with the score and all the sound. So I would also agree, this film has a great cast. Carey Mulligan, so there's a white family and a black family. I don't know if you mentioned that or not, but they're kind of at they live on the same property, and it's kind of about this uneasy dynamic, and they both have sons who go off to the war and come back and face their own issues. And the son, who plays Ronsel, Jax, the actor's Jason Mitchell, I thought was the standout of the movie. He has some really powerful scenes because he went over to Europe and fought for his country in the war, and he comes back to just the same old thing. Nothing has changed. He has, been a hero, has been awarded medals, and here he comes in and he's told he has to go out the back door of the store in his neighborhood. And the humiliation he feels and the just what that does to him as a person, I felt was very powerful.
But it wasn't just, what I found was really interesting was that he was like, in Europe we were cheered, we were, when we came into town, we were, freedom fighters, and the people treated us like anyone else. That was the thing I never really thought about, because Europe had just, was a little more advanced than we were. And so, coming home, he had to dealing with that racism. It was very hard for him, and also having to back down from a fight and having to stand down. That was very tough for him because of what he's been having to do overseas. I did like the family dynamic, because the white family certainly is the one that also owns the farm, and the black family is that works for them, even though they're trying to put together enough money so that they can have their own land, and then tragedy happens on both sides. Mary J. Blige, who's double nominated, so happy Mojo's double nominated for song, which is a wonderful song, and for her performance. She's caretaking for her kids, and she said that she would always stay home because her mother took care of other people's children, and she was never home, and so she wanted to do that. Well, Carey Mulligan's family gets sick, and so she has to come. I mean, there were so many different things. They do such a good job of interweaving so much without having it feel like it's jam-packed. They do enough of it that where they explain a little bit, just what she says. I was so mad. My mom said, was upset that she was never home for us. I want to be home for my kids. That's all she has to say. So then when it happens, you can see her going, oh man, I've got to make this decision. I really enjoyed that.
I did feel like the few times you mentioned the cinematography, and I did like it, a few times it seemed a little dark to me, but I'm not sure if that was just the home viewing experience, or, a few times I was like, oh, I'm not even sure what's going on here, because some of the shots were so
using natural
dark.
lighting inside the those houses.
I think
at the
they
time,
might have been,
perhaps.
and maybe that was for a realistic type thing. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm giving it 3.5 stars.
I have to give it a 4. This was
You're
another
giving
one
that
of
a
the
4?
I really enjoyed that one.
To me, it just went on a little too long.
I didn't mind.
And I felt like it
whatsoever.
was going to end before it ended. Like and the ending was confusing. We talked a lot about that. I felt the ending.
I don't think the
very
ending. I think the
confusing.
ending was supposed to be ambiguous. That's how I eventually found it that way, because I like the two different interpretations that we had, and certainly there was the glass half full and the glass half empty, as it usually is. Wait, is that the right way to say it? Yeah.
I didn't say it was half empty.
I know,
I
but
wasn't
you
sure
can
if it
make
was supposed
it
to be a
up.
literal or interpretation. If it was a literal interpretation that everything worked out great for the Black family, that seemed unrealistic to me,
But-
considering the time period the film is set.
By the
and
way, the
location.
scene that bookends the film with the burial, fantastic. Oh
Okay.
my gosh! Because when you see it first, you're like, "What?" And then at the end,
So
oh
to me,
my
the
God.
ending, not nailing the ending, kept it down to 3.5.
loved it.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next movie, which is Graduation, and this one is not nominated, but it was on a lot of best of critics list from 2017, and it's by a Romanian director, Cristian Mungiu. I'm probably butchering his name.
Yeah, you did.
Is it?
I don't know.
You're just you don't know.
I'm gonna guess.
Who did an acclaimed film called 4 Months, 3 Weeks, and 2 Days back in 2007 that won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. And so this film is highly anticipated and very well reviewed. And it's about a doctor who sacrifices his own morals to try and help his daughter get into college over in England. So they're in Romania, and it's an interesting situation. He is
Yes.
a man who is very much holds himself in esteem for the fact that he hasn't let the Romanian ways, the government, corrupt him and his family. But then he finds himself having to enter this morass of corruption and in some ways do some very unethical things in order to get his daughter out of the corruption.
Correct.
And so it's very, and it sounds much more intellectual than it is. I was riveted by this film.
Yeah, it's interesting, because of the usual payoffs that happen to get people into school, or payoffs that happen just with the police or different, and he's managed to keep his nose clear and clean. And people comment on this, that he's a good man, he's a good doctor, he does an honest job. And so when these things start to happen with his daughter, and usually, you see a movie with the daughter's wanting to just wanting to get out of town. She's wanting to stay. She's got a boyfriend, and he's
her
like,
daughter's like,
no.
and then her father's like, no, I want you to go.
Yeah, you need to go to England. I want you in a school, and I want you out of here. Now, of course, he also has a mistress on the side that he's seeing and having to deal with her. He's got his wife that he's juggling as well. So he's not always when you say, he's a straight and narrow guy, he's not necessarily. Maybe it's the European way. I don't know. That's what's so great about this movie, because there's so many different things that you're sitting there and having to, well, what would you do? And I always enjoy a movie where you sit there and go, well, what would I do? I guess, do you pay that off? I don't know. Right.
Well, and it's interesting because, I read this quote that I thought was great about this film. It says, it's about, this director likes to explore how systems are bad, but it's people are part of this system and they help make it bad, but it doesn't mean that they're bad necessarily all the time. And I really liked that, because I do feel like his character and the whole family, in a lot of ways, are really well-meaning, and he's really trying the best. And he's really someone, he and his wife were idealistic. He mentions at one point that they went back to Romania to try to change things, and it's really broken his spirit that the government is just very corrupt and things are still awful, and crime is extremely high. And what happens to his daughter is horrific. Something awful happens
that's right.
to her.
I forgot about that. Jeez.
Well, that's what spurs all of this, because she's
That's
like a straight
right.
A student until something horrible happens.
There's so
to her.
many things
That's
that
why
happen.
her
That's
grade-
right.
I
It's the
know.
big, huge. Oh, geez,
And
that's
it happens
right.
early on in the film, so we're not
Yeah.
giving too much away. But something horrible happens to her, and that's
Oh,
what
that's
spirals her
right,
grades
yeah.
going down, which makes it harder for her to get this scholarship to go over to England. And so
Yeah.
he's fighting to get her out of the country, because he said, we already tried this. I don't want you to stay and try it. It's not going to work. It's not fixable. And so in a way, it's a pessimistic point of view, but it's also about what parents are willing to do for their kids, which I think is a universal.
I was like when you explain the movie to me. The camera's over there. When I talk to the audience, I'm talking to them. You're always explaining it to me. I watched the movie with you.
Well, you don't always seem to remember, based on the fact you didn't remember something horrific happened to her.
There was so much in this movie. It was a lot to chew on.
So I am giving this one 4 stars.
Surprise. 3.5 for me.
Oh, come on.
It was
Why?
shot, Angela. You know what? Joe Wright needed to direct this movie. We need a little camera movement and need a little something.
No, it didn't.
It was
perfect.
so
He let
plainly
the
shot.
performances speak for themselves. He didn't need to swirl the camera.
It could have been,
around to
yeah.
tell-
Well,
let
we
you
need
know
a
that he
little
knew how to
excitement
use it.
there, just something.
Oh, come on. Yeah, I thought it was much more exciting than anything Joe Wright's ever directed. So, okay, we'll move on. We're done. So then we're moving on. Okay, so to wrap up, we reviewed lots of big award-winning movies, so get out to the theaters, everyone. Call Me By Your Name, both Brian and I agree is 4 stars. I think that's the only one we both gave 4 stars to. Tonya, I gave 3, you gave 3.5.
Wonderful.
Mudbound, you gave 4, I gave 3.5. Where did I leave off? Darkest Hour, you gave 4. You're just handing out 4 stars like candy.
No, I've been backlogging these movies for months.
And then, of course, Graduation, which I give 4 stars to. As always, we'd like to thank our wonderful crew and our sponsors. You can find us on our website, Facebook, Twitter, on KMUZ. You can watch us in Silverton and in Corvallis Access Media. Have a great day and great movies.